Alrighty, we are live with our, I think this is the 9th community mentor stream. With me, I have Anna Kipnis. Anna, would you like to introduce yourself and explain what it is you do at Double Fine?
Yeah, hi guys. I'm Anna Kipnis. I'm a senior gameplay programmer. I do stuff that is very player-facing, like everything from player mechanics, AI, hooking up scripting, like anything that is basically likely to be seen by the player. And I am a client of physics systems and other stuff, rendering, meaning that my code, uses those systems, but that I myself usually don't write very much like graphics code or physics engine code. But I have worked quite a bit with audio, mostly because of the need, we don't have a whole lot of programmers who specialize in that sort of thing. So I have actually done some more system work with audio. I also do a lot of dialogue systems, so that it kind of went hand in hand, the gameplay and the lower level stuff. Yeah, so tell me what you guys want help with, advice with, anything you want to say. If you want to hear my feedback, anything like that.
Yeah, so we'll run through a bit of the project status in a tick, and we'll go to some community questions as well. But before we do, I'm kind of keen to ask, what do you feel is the most important thing you've learned from doing Amnesia Fortnite? Because you've been around for a long time.
Yeah, I've basically done every single one that we've ever had, actually. Yeah. So the thing I've learned the most is that you are, in the beginning, you're gonna be super hopeful about where you're gonna be able to get accomplished, and you're gonna find that you need to reduce scope in order to finish. But when things are looking at their worst, like you think you're not gonna finish, like you still will have something that you're proud of at the end, and you'll still feel amazed of the kind of work that you're able to do in a fairly short amount of time. Programmers typically end up doing things because they're sort of like the end of the line. They're the who are making sure that everything is hooked up. They're often end up being responsible for things that are outside of their normal day-to-day. Like for instance, today I spent a lot of time importing some art assets to make sure that the UI is working well. I've done everything from hooking up music in the past where I had to pick the music that I liked. For instance, that was one of the things that I did in the very first Amnesia Fortnite. But it's cool for me because this is stuff I don't normally get to do, and I really enjoy it. I really enjoy kind of stepping outside of my discipline. That's actually how I got into audio in the first place, was that very first Amnesia Fortnite, because I was the only audio person, or I was the audio person, there are no others, and also a programmer and a few other things. So yeah, it's this idea that you get to do things that's completely outside of what you normally get to do, and then you also learn how to make decisions very quickly, because usually during production you're just there's so much pressure to do it right, so that you never have to redo the code. You are very forward-looking. Your code is easy to maintain and things like that. And during a jam, you don't really write code that way. But it also takes the pressure off, and you end up getting things in a lot faster, and then eases that sense of, I don't know, that kind of programmer's block, I guess.
Right.
So when I get back to my usual work, I'm not going to be quite as scared to do things ooh, is this going to be good? Is this a good decision? I'm sort of well, let's just try it. If it's not, I can always fix it up, type of thing.
So you've played a build that I sent you just earlier. It's this morning's build, so it's not the builds that we put out last night. It's a new special one I did just earlier. Did you have any thoughts or feedback from what you've played so far?
All the stuff, I think I mentioned a couple of things that when I first loaded it up, it was a bit confusing because I just went through all the menus and just oh, I just want the default settings. And then I had a black screen, but that's that I realized exactly what I did. And then I just needed to set a couple of assets up, and then it was fine. It's when you're doing a jam game, it's the likelihood that people are going to expect that something is going to be broken, that you probably just want there to be some basic settings filled out so you never at least get a black screen. I mean, it's not, it didn't, how should I put this? like the game is looking pretty awesome already, you know, or like, I mean, of course, like you guys have had some time to work on it, but it's looking awesome. And but my very first time in, I just got a black screen. So like you have to like sort of play around with like the expectations that players would have from a jam game, and which is going to be like, oh, the game is going to be broken, or like, oh, of course I'm going to find bugs, and people just give up so quickly. Like when they're trying a game out for that's in a jam, like they have no patience for broken games, basically. And your game is not broken at all. So like that's, I guess that's like my bit of feedback is always like give the player the experience that everything is working fine and great, even when like there might be some bugs underneath. Like I've had to hack things together like at the last minute just to you know, sort of shove under the bed any kind of features that we didn't get to or something like that, right? The other thing I will say is like, I don't know, I think it's already looking pretty cool, and like it's playable, and you know, I was able to figure out that the controls were pretty easily, and you have like an AI player, you know, playing with me.
You know, it's pretty cool to see it come together, but I think you're right. There's a big risk of when you're doing like temporary UI, for example, to not feel like you need to give any attention to making it a good user experience. But when you're in a game jam context, often you end up having to live with your placeholder stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I guess my main thing is like the player is not going to spend hours and hours with your game probably. So just guaranteeing that they spend like a good 5 minutes, like a good solid, like whatever, half hour, you know, I'd say half hour is reasonable for the 2-week period that we get. Yeah, like that much time or more. If you have like, I mean, your game is like, you know, multiplayer game, it's a system game. So maybe they would spend way more time with it. Right. But the idea is just like to get them to the game experience as soon as you can, and like, guarantee that, I guess.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Guarantee, I think that's good advice.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you personally find to be the most enjoyable aspects of prototyping? You sort of mentioned that being able to try out stuff that you wouldn't normally have the opportunity to do is fun. Is there anything else that you're excited by?
Yeah, just like trying out an idea that you have in your head that you do. Like, so when I was a kid, I thought that this 2-week jam, that's what game development was like. You just like, you have this idea and then you sit down and 2 weeks later you have a game. That is not actually the case in real game development. Games like can take years and years to make. But you like, the other thing I really love about it is you do live out this childhood fantasy of like impatient, being in a very short amount of time you have a game, right? And it's like, and it's really cool to see like this idea that's just like sort of amorphous and sort of in your brain, and then all of a sudden two weeks later it's actually like a form of it is playable. I think that's really magical and amazing. So that's a thing that I really love. The other thing is like, when we first started with Amnesia Fortnite, we did all of this with the Buddha engine. And the Buddha engine was originally made for Brutal Legend, and that was the only game we thought it was ever going to be able to support, if that makes sense.
It's always the way, right?
Yeah, because at the time, you know, think back, throw your mind back, this is 2005. Like, if you wanted to make a game, there was no, you know, I'm not even sure if Unity was around, but certainly wasn't an option for us. I think we did go to, Unreal 3 was an option, but it didn't have these features that we really needed. I think they had limited terrain editing at the time, and we knew that it was going to be like this open world and, you know, streaming stuff, or streaming terrain and streaming objects and like all kinds of like Unreal 3 is really ideal for games that take place inside of like internal spaces. Even like if you look at Gears of War, a lot of those external spaces were made as if they were internal spaces. Like, you know, there's like this beautiful skybox and everything, but really the way they think of space is like rooms. Whereas we really like our game was going to be very different. So we decided like, oh, well, we'll just roll our own. We rolled our own for Psychonauts. Now we got to do, you know, Psychonauts engine can't do what we need, so we'll just have to write another engine. And at this point, it was like every feature, like it was like on our Christmas list for the things that we wanted to have in the game engine. That's what the Buddha engine was. But because it was written from scratch and because we were writing it specifically for Brutal Legend, we never imagined that we could make different games with it. And so one of the things I really enjoyed at that time was the idea is like, whoa, this engine we wrote is so amazing that we can like write all these different games with it. I think the novelty of that has worn off just because, you know, it's been years now, and we've made a lot of different games with the Buddha engine, but still, and that's still exciting. Like knowing that with this, you know, even though I'm working at Segments 2, I can make this totally different game with it, you know, with the same engine.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, and it's like in terms of these kind of multi multi game engines, it feels like Buddha had like a really fairly long lifespan,
Yeah.
as far as internally developed stuff goes. So hats off to you guys for building some cool tech there.
Thanks. Now, you guys, I noticed you're using Unity. How have you? How's that been for you so far?
It's got its ups and downs, there are some of us who don't enjoy working with Unity, and there are other people who have a bit more experience. But I think ultimately it was the right choice for us to make for this project because it was Unity is kind of accessible, and there's a lot of community resources out there for people to get up to speed quickly with, and B, we had a lot of like pre-existing experience that we could lean on. So I think that was the right decision to make.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, for the most part, it's been pretty good. It's been fairly flexible. There are some questions about how good and how appropriate the input manager is, or the GUI system is for our specific use case. But as far as a general purpose engine goes, I mean, it's pretty impressive, I think.
Yeah, yeah. How's the networking been working for you guys? You mentioned there you had a few problems.
Um, yeah, networking's going okay. We've got some issues at the moment where it seems like it's not updating fast enough, and so the prediction and interpolation that happens on the client side ends up making it look like the ball doesn't hit obstacles. But I think we can tune that up. I don't think that's going to be a big thing. We're just using Unity's default network manager at the moment, and yeah, I mean, like the fact that we were able to get something up and running as quickly as we were is is pretty good.
Yeah, 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 totally. Hey, so I have a question. There's something I ran into when I was playtesting the game, is that when the paddle was like at the edges, I noticed that the ball could slip through. Was that intentional, or was that like the paddle didn't
No,
reach?
no, I think that's an issue that we're probably going to have to. I think we've been staving it off because there are other changes that we want to make. But basically, we've got one base scene that contains the paddles and a couple of other bits and pieces, and then we load in the level geometry around that. And I
Hmm.
think some levels are just a little bit wider than others, so the limits that we've put on how far the paddle can move aren't appropriate for all of the levels that we've got at the moment. So we can tune that up. I think we've got some ideas for how we could address that. Whether we can find time to do something that looks nice in the short term, I don't know. But at the very least, we can just go, yeah, just extend it. It doesn't matter if it penetrates into the wall on some levels. Like it's not a
Yeah,
big deal.
yeah. So
Yeah.
what are you working on right now? Like now it's kind of the last day or so. How have you been finding prioritizing what you need to sort of finish, or like what to do to kind of like land the plane, as it were?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've got a team that has very diverse range of experiences and skills,
Mhm.
and so sort of wrangling that and also at the same time encouraging people to focus on things that they're personally excited by.
Mhm.
'Cause I think that's an important part for like a community-based project, and that is done by your volunteers who are just doing it for fun. Is to make sure that it stays fun. But yeah, we've been having like catch-up video meetings every morning for the past day or two, and that seems to be going pretty well in terms of getting people up to speed on what needs doing and where we're at. But functionality-wise, the things that we're keen to push in, fingers crossed, before the end of Amnesia Fortnight, are some improvements to the UI to partially to address the problem that you encountered when you were playtesting and you ended up with a black screen. Um, and partially just to make that more readable and make it easier for players to understand what those options mean. Um, we're going to be making some changes to the way that the paddles work. So at the moment, they're just like a flat box collision or collider that we're working with there, and we're going to replace that with something curved, so that the point that the ball impacts on the paddle influences the reflection angle. As I think at the moment it's very difficult to have any sense of control or meaningful control over where the ball is going to end up, and giving players that is going to make a difference to the game. Um, we've also got some mostly implemented sort of special ability power things that we're probably going to give some attention to polishing up. So you can like press a button, and there are three powers at the moment. One is to obscure the player's vision around their own paddles so that they don't know necessarily where they are, have to rely on their memory to predict where they're going to need to be and whether or not they can hit the ball. We've got another one that's meant to block movement of your opponent's paddle temporarily, and a third one that can be used as a sort of defensive thing that slows down the ball's movement within a radius near your paddle. So it's sort of these ideas of trying to do things that sort of spice up the gameplay a little bit and give you something to do when the ball's on the other side of the playing field and you want to influence its movement and the outcomes there. But yeah, it's sort of aside from that, just a few bits of polish here and there. We want to try and get some more audio in and some more of the assets that we've had contributed that we haven't had time to push into the game. But yeah, it's just mostly little stuff I think that we're trying to focus on at the moment.
Very cool.
Yeah. So we've got a few questions coming in. We might see if some of these are worth touching on. A Fragmental Stew is asking how you might handle a collider for a Pong style paddle.
I'm sorry, collider?
So like the bounding box for a paddle, like at the moment, as I was saying, ours is square and flat. I think the question is about how would you go about like whether you, with a physics-based game, how you would go about handling having control and influence over the ball movement in a Pong style environment.
That's a good question. Well, so the velocity of the paddle would be, you might want to like certain things that you would want to do in Pong is you might want to like, based on like whether the player is trying to do a little spin on the paddle at the time that the ball makes contact with it. Like maybe you would take a look at that velocity and then also the normal like at which the ball hit, and based on the direction of the velocity, like kind of like figure out the trajectory. Maybe like there could be a little I don't know if a spin is really the thing, but maybe the ball could increase velocity as a result of that, and maybe its direction would be slightly affected by the direction of the velocity of the paddle. Something like that. Aside from that, it would just be, like if the player simply lined up the paddle with exactly where the ball would hit. So like the ball is like, going like this, and the paddle is just staying still. I would imagine like there being just the reflection angle based on the normal. But
right.
But if you have a situation like this where the player is like, the ball is about to approach and the player goes like this, or like as quickly as you, or like, if I don't remember like now the controls. Can you do? Yeah, I think you can. You can have a little bit of velocity for the paddle as it's arriving at that spot. And I would imagine that
wider than the ball.
Yeah, and I would imagine that if that were the case, that the ball would at least gain a little bit of speed. I don't know if you would necessarily change the angle of reflection, but definitely it would make some difference. And I think that would feel pretty good. Like it would feel like, oh, I actually have a little bit more control. It's not just that I'm hitting the ball back and then the angle of reflection is going to go a certain way, but that I have some I have some agency over the velocity of the ball, maybe even the angle at which it gets.
I think as well that if you're like, if you feel like you're not going to make it, you're racing to meet it, and you touch it, and it goes off in some kind of, because you're rushing to make that save. That if the ball reacts in a way that's out of the ordinary if you're hitting it from a stationary thing, that might be some nice feel that increases the sense of tension when you're doing those kind of things as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a question.
Yeah. So Milan has asked, what is the thing you've always wanted to do with the dialogue system but haven't been able to so far?
Well, okay, so it's not that I've never done anything like this, but so one of the first things that I did when I started Double Fine was I did Boyd's dialogue, and I haven't done anything, and it felt really interesting, like the fact that you would be constructing sentences on the fly, and I've never done anything like that since. And what I would really love is a game that got closer to the sense of like how conversations actually take place in game, or sorry, in real life, but try to capture more of that feeling in conversation. So it's not just dialogue trees. That there's like a sense of what it's like as a human, as a human experience to actually have a conversation. And there's there's a few things that could be interesting to prototype. Like it's obviously an experimental idea, but I feel like that would be really fun. And some of that would have to do with creating responses on the fly, like making it feel really sort of like more dynamic, I guess, than just pre-authored responses. There would be like certainly pre-authored, but there would be something a little bit more to them, and just coming up with a more systematic, like more dynamic way of doing that. That would be like if I had to pitch another AF game, like that's what I would kind of work on. And I've done
Dialogue Simulator 2018.
Yeah. And I've done kind of like, in my own time or with collaboration with some friends and things like that. I've done, there's a game called Wheels of Aurelia that experimented with like dialogue while driving.
Yeah.
It's like an arcade style, just like little, like sort of how, like the old like 80s or 90s arcade style driving simulators, but you're also having a conversation at the same time, which I think is kind of interesting. Yeah, and other things like that. I'm always interested in, getting conversations as a game mechanic. That it's not just a choice. That it's like actually something more engaging than that. Because conversations are a lot harder than just picking like multiple choice, right?
Right. I once played a game jam game that used, I think it was just Alice as a backend for dialogue. It was just a chatbot, and you were like in a room with these two characters, and they were both using a chatbot, and you had to interact with them in certain ways to accomplish things. And it was really interesting. Like it was made in a hurry just for a jam, and I think it might have been like just a solo dev team or two people, but it was this really interesting idea of like dynamic, flowing, feeling conversations. I really thought it was cool.
Yeah, if any of you are familiar with Emily Short's work, she did Versu originally. I don't know if you can still buy some of those games in the App Store, but yeah, Emily Short is very good with. She's done she's a writer, but she does games obviously, and she's done quite a few really interesting experiments with conversation games in particular.
Yeah, definitely. Fragmental Stew is asking what version control system you use, and has it ever given your team any grief? And I guess it's like, do you feel that the version control system you're using can impact on the kind of teamwork or kind of team dynamics that you have? You're using Perforce, right?
Yeah, we're using Perforce, definitely. So okay, so the major thing, so you really should, like if your team is more than 2 or 3 people, you really should look into version control. In fact, on very small teams where it's like literally 2 or 3 people, I use Dropbox because there is a little bit of version control with Dropbox, but it's not so much like, doesn't require nearly as much setup as Perforce would. But version control is so nice to have, and there's so many different solutions out there. I think Perforce is probably overkill for smaller teams, and I think it's maybe even expensive. I'm not 100% sure on that, but there are plenty version control things out there, like GitHub and SVN, I think it's called. I used on one of the other projects.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's just very, very useful, and you have you get a bit of a peace of mind when you make changes that you can always revert them. You can always roll them back. If your game suddenly breaks and you have no idea what broke it, and you just want to sync back, you can do things like sync back change by change to see at which point it stopped working and at which point it will start working again. There's just these invaluable tools, especially if you're on a deadline or anything like that. The other thing is definitely pick a source control program that allows you to cheat code, that allows you to merge code. I think most of them do.
Yeah, I think it's pretty standard.
Not the case. It used to not be the case. But this is an issue with Unreal, because if you're doing work with blueprints, they're binary files, and so you can't merge them. So it does become a problem.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky. I think with Unity, you guys avert so you have you can collaborate a little bit more easily. Also, I think Unity exports to text, even levels themselves. You can have it so you can do diffs and things like that. I learned, working with Unreal for a while with binary files, just how much I missed just plain old text diffs.
Yeah, I like being able to look at a diff and going, okay, I see what's happening here. Whereas when you're in a GUI editor, you're like, well, what did it look like before? I don't know.
Exactly, and then there's sometimes there are things in the GUI editor when the arrangement becomes part of a change, and so you can just move something around, and that is a legitimate change to a GUI. Whereas in code, I mean, it's it knows how to treat those things. So I mean, some of these are just small feature requests, I suppose you could call them, for Epic. Whenever they do get the time to fix them. But yeah, I really miss text diffs, I guess. and
I hope that Unreal adds I hope that Unreal adds a text version of the blueprint files, because it's kind of crazy without it.
Yeah. I gotta get back to work soon, so just but if you have one final question,
we'll do one last question. Kyle3Win is asking, how often as a programmer do you find that you're excited about a feature you're currently working on versus you're just doing something that needs to be done?
Ooh, that's tricky. I mean, I feel like a lot of the features I'm really excited about doing they're not one really quick singular thing. They're part of a larger system where I am, you can subdivide it into smaller tasks. And at the smaller task level, there might be one that I'm just really not stoked about, but a lot of them might be really interesting, but it's this bigger thing that I'm after. And so I've sort of over time trained myself not to think about each individual thing, because sometimes if you think of it that way, then a lot of it will seem tedious to you. You should just always keep the bigger picture, the bigger idea, because that's what you're striving toward, and that's what you're comparing your current work to, how far away am I from here, So yeah, I don't know. I don't think of the things like that anymore. Maybe for my own sanity.
I think that's a good way to be, because otherwise you can end up blocking yourself on something that you're not motivated for, when it's stopping you from reaching stuff that you are motivated for.
Yeah, I mean, there are interesting things about almost every single thing that you will ever do. There's if something feels tedious, it might just be because you're not automating it enough, or who knows, I think the most frustrating thing for me to work on are really difficult bugs, things that are super difficult to trace, or really hard to debug, sometimes UI or controls that you can't actually put breakpoints in the code, you have to do prints just because it happens so fast, or you click something down, but you need anyway, there's some input state changes. Those are really tricky to trace, and I think debugging can be really difficult. but you still have to do it, and otherwise your future is going to be broken. So yeah, even that you have to learn to love. It's almost like solving difficult puzzles in like an adventure game, right?
It is. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that was fun.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say before we close?
Good luck, you guys. You're doing great, and I just want you to know that sometimes it's like, especially when you don't, when you're all working remotely or something like that, you need to feel like your work really counts, like, and that you're contributing to this thing, and just know that it's every little thing that you do is going to make the game better. So yeah, just feel proud of yourselves for doing this. It's awesome. Like, you're actually creating something. You're not just sitting back and like consuming a game. You're actually doing something. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a cool thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Cheers.
Cheers. I'll see you later. Good luck.